Boxy and Ariel. Once upon a time, there was a man named Pete. Pete lived in London, England, in a one-story apartment with his cat named Pickles. He was a lonely man. He spent his days working in a box factory and eating mac and cheese while watching Friends. But one day, Pete had a plan. He wanted a vacation so grand he could finally be happy. Pete did his research and found a 4-day cruise of butterflies. It was perfect. The trip wasn't for another 6 months, so Pete began saving. He was so excited he didn't buy anything other than the essentials until this trip. He ate so much mac and cheese and even had to cancel his cable to afford this trip, which meant no more watching Friends. As the day went on, without his TV, he was stuck reading books and he didn't like to read. He began to get more and more lonely, crying himself to sleep every night. He wondered if this trip could come any faster. Finally, Pete only had a week left until his trip. He saved up so much money and was so prepared that he started packing. He packed enough clothes for his 4-day trip and just a few just-in-case pieces as well. He arranged for one of his box factory coworkers to look over Pickles since he really didn't have any friends. The night before the trip, he was so ecstatic he hardly slept. Pete woke in the morning, got ready for his trip, and called a taxi to take him to the coast. The ship was sailing out of the North Atlantic Ocean, and it was only a 30-minute drive to the ocean from his apartment. He was on the edge of his seat the entire ride. He had been waiting for months to finally feel happy. When he arrived at the boarding spot, he saw the ship in person for the first time. It was beautiful, with butterflies flying all around it. There were even a bunch of kids catching the butterflies from the dock. Pete, for the first time in years, smiled so big that his face was unrecognizable. He loaded his luggage onto the boat and into his room that he would be staying in for the next 4 days and immediately went exploring. He explored all the butterflies and everything else the ship had to offer, even getting himself food other than mac and cheese. As it was getting closer to dark, Pete started making his way back to his room with a full tummy to watch some TV before bed. Of course, he watched Friends. Day 2 on the ship was the best day Pete could ever ask for. He immediately leaped out of bed and made his way to the breakfast area and ate delicious pancakes while butterflies were flying all around him. He spent the rest of the day doing exactly what he did yesterday. He walked around, ate a lot of food, fed, and caught butterflies, watched all the fish in the water, and even took a shower. It was starting to get dark, so Pete made his way back to his room, where he watched Friends and fell asleep. He woke in the middle of the night to a loud bang from below. He checked the clock, 3:37 a.m. He didn't know what had happened, but he ignored it and went right back to sleep. He woke up again, but this time at 3:59 a.m. to alarms blaring, fire alarms. This time, instead of ignoring it, he left his room to find out what was happening. When he made his way to the top deck of the ship, he suddenly saw flames along with a large tail in the water. He was so confused. Pete was stunned. Not only was there a large tail, but he also saw a shark's fin. He couldn't fully focus on the tail and the shark because the ship was being engulfed in flames. He quickly asked someone on the ship what was happening. A crew member responded, "A shark. A shark hit the ship, causing the gas at the bottom to erupt." Pete quickly looked around for a life jacket. He saw one hanging on the edge of the ship. He ran for it. But it was too late. The ship rocked too hard. Pete fell off the ship. Pete plummeted into the cold, dark water. Out of nowhere, he was being held. He couldn't see anything. He was eventually lifted out of the water, where he looked to his left and saw the most beautiful face he had ever seen. He was so shocked he couldn't process what was happening. He was too stunned to speak. He didn't fight the beautiful person carrying him. He just stared at her and suddenly said, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of you." Pete just stared at her blindly. They finally reached shore. It was too dark, but he could faintly see a large tail. "You're a mermaid?" She laughed and said, "My name is Ariel." "What's your name, handsome?" "My name is Pete," he said nervously. Pete felt weird. He felt like he was oddly changing. Pete started turning into a cube. One arm, one hand, one foot, one leg, all turned into a cube. Not just any cube, a hot pink cube. "What?" he screamed. "I saw some gas on the ship. Maybe it was a chemical reaction," Ariel said scaredly. Pete felt insecure. "Don't look at me. I'm so ugly." Just when he thought Ariel wouldn't like him, she leaned over and kissed him. "You're not ugly. You're the most handsome man I've ever laid eyes on." Pete blushed. "Well, I think you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen," he said with a smile. Ariel also smiled. "Well, I need to get going before I get caught by my dad or any other humans." "I will never see you again," Pete said nervously. "Until we meet again," she said as she kissed him goodbye. Pete was still in shock about what happened. He was turning into a bright pink box. He met a hot mermaid. He was stranded out and his ship burnt down. With nowhere to go, Pete stayed put. He woke in the morning with nothing to do, nobody to talk to, no clothes, and no food. He thought of Ariel. He missed her. And he was also super hungry. In desperate need for food, Pete started walking towards the ocean. As he reached the water, he noticed something. He wasn't sinking into the water. He was floating. He could walk on water. Pete spent the rest of his day walking on the ocean. That night, Pete saw something. "Ariel," he shouted as he was swimming fastly to him. They hugged and kissed each other so happily. "I really want to be with you for the rest of my life. I never want to go another day without you being next to me," Pete said immediately. He was so in love. "I want to be with you too, but what about my dad? How are we going to meet him? You have legs and I don't," she responded nervously. "Don't worry, I can walk on water." So Pete followed Ariel out into the ocean to meet her father. "Let me go get my dad," Ariel said and hurriedly swam away. Pete stood in the middle of the ocean, waiting patiently. He saw them coming and slightly prepared himself. "How can this be the man you want to be with?" her father said while laughing. He paused for a moment. "You look like a box, Pete." "I'm aware," Pete said. "Well, whatever. Have fun, Ariel," his father said as he swam away, still laughing. Pete and Ariel were so happy that they got the blessing from their father. "I'm going to call you Boxy," Ariel said, and Pete loved it. Although the circumstances were weird, they made it work. They fell in love and even had a child named Murbox, and they lived happily ever after.